I.S.L.A.M wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Islamic Society Leading American Muslims, an organization that was established to conduct da'wah, to invite people to the true and peaceful message of Islam, and to educate and empower those who come this way, and to nurture and empower those who were born into a Muslim family and are looking for a place that is non-judgmental, non-critical, non-castigating, and non-indicting. So again, I welcome you. And do we have anyone here for the first time today? Okay, alhamdulillah. Just want to make sure.
What was the question?
Did we have anyone here for the first time today? Okay. All right, alhamdulillah. So I'm guessing that everybody got the memo, and we will leave here today at 12:30 promptly to be at the lunch at 1 o'clock. There will be no class on September the 15th and the 22nd because inshallah on Wednesday I will be leaving for Amman, Jordan. And so please write that in your calendars. I would hate for you to arrive here and no one would be here. So I just want to sort of recap a little bit with the blessing of Dorian and how we were so blessed not to be affected at all, really, by that storm. I want to remind us of sort of what we've been talking about the last couple of classes with the different sort of interruptions. And we've been talking about cultivating an environment for inner spiritual growth. And so everything in the I.S.L.A.M, in the I.S.L.A.M, the seen world, and the world, the dunya, and the nafs and the desires points to some deeper meaning in the inner unseen realm, the I.S.L.A.M, the world abode of the ruh or spirit. So we've looked at the fact that we have controlled and uncontrolled environments. We have internal and external environments. We have voluntary and involuntary environments. We have environmental risk, voluntary and involuntary. We have the seen and unseen environments. We have spiritual and unspiritual environments. Taking control of the environments that controls you maximizes one's spiritual potential, and of course that's the whole purpose of our class, is to maximize spiritual potential. Controlling our environment provides the foundational basis for carrying out inner controls. So if you want to learn how to control, the most difficult part to control and to actually learn about is the unseen part, which is the inner dimension. How we control our environments in the alam al-shahada according to the Quran and Sunnah will set the tone for our internal and external environments and states spiritually. We've also been working on tahdib, the refinement of character, and environments for inner spiritual growth and returning to the fitra. So I just sort of wanted to do that as a sort of prefix to the class so that you know where we're picking up from. In alhamdulillahi ta'ala nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina wa may yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa may yudlil fala hadiya lahu wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu rasuluh. Indeed, all the praise is due to Allah. We praise Allah. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil in our soul and from our sinful deeds. Those who are guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one can misguide them. Those who are not guided by Allah, there is no guide for them. I bear witness that there is no deity, there is no God worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his servant and messenger. O you who believe, revere Allah as Allah alone should be revered, and die not except as Muslims. Amma ba'd. So today I want to look at several groups, or few groups anyway, of concepts that are vital to our understanding and practice of Islam. And they are vital to our understanding and practice of Islam in terms of creating and cultivating an environment for inner spiritual growth. Now, we have to have the correct conceptions of religion Otherwise, we will practice a religion incorrectly. So, for example, the old saying, practice makes perfect, is not true. Because if I practice incorrectly, I will not perfect my religion. So we have to have accurate knowledge. So we have to have the correct conceptions of religion and deen, whereby we realize the true gauge of our religiosity. I don't like the word religiosity, and I really struggle with this word. I wanted to use the word spirituality, but that has such a broad meaning, it was too broad. So I put in parentheses here sort of what I mean. The quality of our strong feelings or beliefs and religious orientation and involvement. So if you stop and ask yourself, what kind of feelings? On a scale of 1 to 10, how strong are my feelings toward Islam and toward my practice in Islam? How am I oriented religiously? Am I oriented that I set my day up to pray 5 prayers a day on time? Or am I oriented that I am a Muslim by name? I do a thing here and there. I don't really take it that seriously. And how involved am I? How involved am I with my religiosity? How involved am I with Islam? How involved am I with actually ensuring that I create an environment for inner spiritual growth? Is even inner growth a part of my thinking process? Or am I just on automatic pilot? This is how we respond to those involuntary environments, which include people that are going to be a part of our lives. So as we move into the class today, we're going to talk a lot about these involuntary environments that we're in. My work here at Rollins is an involuntary environment. There are certain rules here that I have to adhere to that are not necessarily ideal for me, but it's part of the environment. Many of the reverts and converts that I talk to, one of their biggest struggles is how to deal with their families. The families that don't accept them because they have committed to the Shahada, at least. That might be the limits of their commitment. I read this, I got turned on to this, I felt called to this, I did my Shahada. Then what did I do afterwards? How much did I develop that? So we don't choose or control the people in our families, our parents, our siblings, our aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, or nephews, bosses, classmates, co-workers, etc. So when we find ourselves in these environments that are not perhaps the people of our choosing, they're not the people that are going to be most conducive for us to develop spiritually. So, for example, recently one of my relatives invited me to go see a movie. They said, "Oh, you will love this movie." And I went to see this movie, and in this movie I was taught about somebody accepting Jesus as their Lord. And this is a movie in the cinemas. It is called Overcome. Very sort of deceiving, I thought. That this movie is on the main circuit, but there's an undertone and there's an intention to propagate Christianity in this movie. So obviously, if I'm trying to make the insides of myself, my soul, my ruh, in a good state, that wouldn't do it. So I went to see the movie, and it had some very touching places in it, some things that I could relate to spiritually, but it clearly was a proselytizing the Christian faith. So I want to look at some complementary Islamic concepts. And then we will talk about, for a second, the intersection of Sharia, divine law, and Hakika. And I will obviously explain what Hakika is to you. When we talk about Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, these are complementary concepts. Nafs Amara, Nafs Lawama, Nafs Mutmainah, complementary concepts. They all build upon each other. So, for example, I can never get to nafs mutmainah if I'm not at nafs amara or nafs lawama. So this will all fit together, inshallah. Sharia is derived from sharia, to introduce or to prescribe, and it refers to the canonical law of Islam. Oftentimes misunderstood. Hakika means truth. And of course, as you can see in Hakika, the root, haq. Just to help you understand, when we talk about the haq, we talk about that which is real, that which is true. We talk about the kalam of Allah, the speech of Allah. And actually, many of the great scholars, when they say the haq, they actually are referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So hakika means truth or reality and refers to the concept of an esoteric, essential truth that transcends human limitations. It is the knowledge that comes from communication with Allah. And so I will stop and ask us to ask ourselves, and I ask myself, how much time do I spend that looks like hakika? How much time do I look at how much I am actually gaining from knowledge and how much I actually communicate with Allah? And I meet a lot of Muslims that say, brother, I don't pray 5 times a day. I might get 2 of them in. A lot of people tell me this. I might get 3. And the prayer, the salat, is actually a dialogue between you and Allah. It is a conversation with Allah. A lot of people think it's a monologue. I say all these things I've got to say. But when we redo the prayer class, you will learn that Allah is actually speaking to you. When you are reciting the kalam of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to you as well. But there are specific pieces of the prayer that are about communicating with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now, if I look at the amount of communication I've done, how much knowledge have I gained? We need to ask ourselves these questions. Because if I don't gain any knowledge, then perhaps I'm not praying with the right conditions. Perhaps I'm not praying with khushu'. Perhaps I'm not really focused, but perhaps I'm in a ritual state. I'm just doing it to get it done, but with no ruh and no spirit. Hakika literally means what is true, established, or constant. Haq, the truth. Hakika denotes that an utterance, an act, or a creed is in total agreement with what is originally true, real, and genuine. So, for example, when we are practicing, we always want to practice Islam as closely as we can to the way that it was practiced when the Prophet ﷺ taught it. And there are some groups that tout and propagate that they are the ones. They actually call themselves Salaf as-Salih. They actually call themselves Salafi. Now, we all want to be Salaf as-Salih. We all want to follow the rightly guided predecessors. And they will tell you that there is a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ whispered to his daughter Fatima that she should be Salafi. But if I use the word Salaf, am I a Salafi? Did the Prophet ﷺ ever call himself a Salafi? So be careful, folks. These people will tell you this is the only minhaj. If you're not down with this, you're not down with Islam. And this is called radicalization. This is called rigidity. And it's not the balanced way. It's not the middle path. I'll take all questions at the end of the class because we're recording. And just write your question down and we'll come back. So it's very important because a lot of new reverts get caught up in these organizations and they can't maintain the rigidity. So I'll give you an example. I did some marriage education for a couple, and no one knows them because they don't live here. And then the young man was told by his Salafi teacher that this is haram because there's nowhere in the Quran that says that you need marriage education. You just meet somebody and you hook up and that's it. I was supposed to call this man to get a reference. And this man attacked me and told me that what I'm doing is contrary to Islam. So, this is not free thinking, and this is not how Islam was built, folks. So I just feel that it's very important. This is not the first time in my life that I've come up against these folks. As a matter of fact, these folks tried to kill me twice. This is true. In the prison system, they hid and they found weapons twice. These people tried to kill me. And this is not from Islam. Okay. When it is mentioned without reference to anything particular, as mentioned in Surah 24, verse 25, on that day Allah will pay them back all their just dues. And they will come to realize that Allah it is who is al-hukukul mubin, the clear, ultimate truth and ever constant that makes all things manifest. So it is from this verse that many of the scholars say that the haqq is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there is no other reality. I will extend it and say there's no other reality than Allah and His message. And when I say His message, I mean the kalam of Allah found in the Holy Quran. Hakika is one of the 4 steps in our spiritual journey. And the first step, of course, is the Sharia, the divine way or law we need to know to practice responsibilities which Allah has charged us with. So when I talk about my level of religiosity or my level of commitment to Islam, how can I know that if I don't have knowledge? And then we have, and you will find this, by the way, this word is very often used among Sufi Muslims. I'm using the word for you to see the root and to understand the essence of what I'm saying. When we talk about tariqah, I'm using it in the context of a spiritual path. So actually the Sharia is a spiritual path. It is the way to a watering hole. This is one of the literal definitions. So the spiritual path or way of implementing and experiencing the spiritual depths of the Sharia. So again, I'm using sort of context here. I'm not promoting the actual word. I'm trying to explain an idea that we need to be on an intentional, purposeful path. We need to have a spiritual plan. How am I going to get from nafs amara to nafs lawama and nafs mutmainah? How am I going to get from iman to ihsan? Very important. The third stage is hakika, the way of attaining the mysteries, essence. And so we've been talking a lot about tafakkur and tadabbur. If I want to understand the mysteries of this great religion, the inner dimensions of this religion, I will not do that if I practice on the surface. As a matter of fact, it was very beautiful. I recommended the book, The Way of Resistance, right?
The Book of Assistance.
The Book of Assistance, yeah. For some reason it wouldn't come to me. And I was talking to Albert, which I think he knows I knew this, but he was telling me how full this book is. And of course I relate to things like that because I like to take things as deep as I possibly can. So I encourage you again to read this book. We have one copy available, right, Mason?
One, yes.
Mm-hmm. Even if you pass it around, I really, if you want to get the art of contemplation, I encourage you to read this book. So hakika, the way of attaining the mysteries, essence, and genuine inner dimensions of divine attributes through discernment, efforts, and practice. So we know that we were looking at the asma wa sifat, the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, before we moved into cultivating an environment for inner spiritual growth. And the reason is so that you could learn these qualities and inshallah make an effort to practice them, to make the essence of them part and parcel of your life, part of your personality profile. The fourth is ma'arifah, the capacity of and provision for the gift that comes in return for seeking, feeling, and obtaining knowledge of certain subtle, profound truths concerning the essential qualities or characteristics of the divine and the mysteries of divinity. So, this capacity will never come to you unless you are on a path and you employ deep levels of contemplation. You will just be on the surface. Sharia and Hakika, looking at the world as dunya and the world as alam, are both two sides of the coin. When we talk about the three levels of faith, Iman, which means belief or faith, Islam, and Ihsan, spiritual excellence, they are all interrelated. In Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 208, O you who believe, enter into Islam completely. So we see in another verse in the Quran that it is whole self-submission. It's not just a little piece of me that's Islam. It should be my living and my dying. My whole self, from the first breath I take to the last one, should be for the cause of Islam. Ihsan is the highest status of religion in this context in Islam. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ described it as to worship Allah as if you see Allah, and if you do not see Allah, Allah sees you. So I find myself forgetting Allah. Yesterday, the family went and played putt-putt. And I was sitting down and I thought about how many minutes had been that I had not consciously remembered Allah. I was very saddened at my state of affairs when I realized how long had passed that I had not remembered Allah. The concept of ihsan in Islam is also that a Muslim is a responsible person where he or she does things in a good manner. We can say that ihsan means a Muslim is sure that Allah is seeing him or her in everything he or she says or does in his or her life. So a Muslim does his or her best to say and do only what pleases Allah Almighty and conforms to his or Allah's commands. All of these terms are interrelated, and often when we speak of them individually, we sometimes do a disservice to our students. They don't exist separately from one another. There is no Islam without Iman. Iman is the foundation. There is no Islam without Iman. If I never had the faith and the belief in Islam, will I have Islam? Can I have Islam if I don't have Iman? If I don't have Islam and Iman, can I ever have Ihsan? Can I have spiritual perfection? Islam is built on the 5 pillars of Islam. Only when you are implementing, materializing, and realizing the 5 are you realizing Islam. So I must be praying my 5 prayers. I must be fasting unless I have a concession. Perhaps I have diabetes or some other ailment. Then I should be feeding the poor. I must be paying zakat if I'm eligible. I must be going to Hajj. I must be doing all of the 5 pillars. Iman is the source for everything. There is no Islam or Ihsan without Iman. Iman is the foundation of the other 2, but also Iman and Islam is the foundation of Ihsan. There is no Ihsan without Islam and Iman. And I hope that you're processing this. I hope that you are thinking, contemplating very deeply about what I'm saying and not getting lost in how it rhymes. One is not going to just have Iman and Ihsan and be missing the component of Islam. Just as Iman and Islam are the foundation of Ihsan, likewise Ihsan represents the completion of both Iman and Islam. We are told to complete our faith, to perfect our faith. So one can't be complete in their Iman without Ihsan, nor can one have complete Islam without Ihsan. They are all interrelated. They all go together. This is the beautiful thing about our deen. Every possible dichotomy, and I'll just define that word because for some reason, some people ask me, what does that mean? Division or contrast between two things that are or are represented as being opposed or entirely different. This is the beautiful thing about our deen. Every possible dichotomy that can be resolved or broken through, we can do this with our deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that when you differ in a matter, refer to Allah and His Messenger. Islam is a panacea. It is the answer to all of the ills of the world and the only answer, the final revelation. One can prevent oneself from being dichotomized by the environment we find ourselves in. How? By referring to Allah and His Messenger. I all of a sudden find myself in a situation. I landed in Gilligan's Island, but all of them are dead now. And the only thing I could find was a six-pack that was left behind. Because I have knowledge, I know that I can drink that because that's all I got to drink. I'm going to be real dizzy. Yeah. We can give order and proportion to our souls and find the balance, which is ultimately what we are all seeking for, to simultaneously see the same thing from two perspectives. This is not an easy thing to do because the tendency is to be very one-sided. We as human beings tend to operate in a very polarized way. Either the light is on or the light is off. Either it's black or it's white. And we fail to see that there's a whole lot in the middle. Even if we look at the practice of Islam, we will say this is allowed, this is allowed, and this is allowed, but this is the best practice. What we are striving for is balance. We want to balance the outward, external, exoteric, which means normal walking conscious, with the inward, internal, esoteric, meditative, spiritual state. And that is a lot. That's a power-packed sentence. If I ask you, where is your balance today? Is my balance completely focused on the outward? Or 70% is on the outward? Can I say that 30% is focused on the inward? What we want to be able to say is that 100% is focused on both. The first is ego-centered and the latter is self-transcendent. We have to live in this world. We don't have a choice. And we have to do what we do in this world. There is benefit and protection in that. If the mistakes one is making is of an outward nature, they are much easier to correct as opposed to those of an inward nature. So it's amazing. That which we can see is easier to correct. But that which I cannot see, that resentment, that anger, that hatred, that arrogance that is inside of my heart is much harder to see and therefore much harder to correct, isn't it? The inward nature is harder to correct. In the outward, there is an objective nature to it, so it is much easier to rectify. And we are striving again for balance. And I can't emphasize the word balance enough. Because what I hear from folks is we're not in balance. That the majority of our focus is dunya related and it's not balanced. It's not, if you want to use the word 50-50, I never like 50-50 because I don't want 50% of anything. A 50 is an E or an F. I want 100 on both sides. I never liked the idea from a mathematical standpoint of, well, he gives 50 and she gives 50. You want a 50% marriage? You want a 50% relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No, we must be giving 100, striving for that. That is ihsan. In every moment, we want to see what is happening before us in one of two perspectives. What is happening outwardly and how we should view that inwardly. So when we see something is happening, how are we viewing it inwardly? What is my heart saying to me? Simultaneously, we're viewing the world as I.S.L.A.M and dunya. We want to protect ourselves in that pool of the dunya so our hearts do not become clouded. The Quran warns us that we will be deluded by the world, by the dunya. I.S.L.A.M is an opportunity for censure. And the beauty of that is that every single moment of our lives is an opportunity to draw near to Allah. So, how do I actually implement this? That every single moment of my life, every 60 seconds of every minute, and every 60 minutes of every hour is for me to draw nearer to Allah. Are we sincere when we say that, or do we just say it, but then as soon as we get away from the group, then we start thinking about how quickly can I do something in the world? And we really need to examine ourselves very closely regarding these issues. Even if you are in the worst possible environments, it can be transformed into one of the most beautiful things. So, many of us have been in environments that were very, very testing. Some of us might have been terminally ill at various times in our life. And we could have taken that focus on, well, what's going to happen to my home? I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. I'm not going to be able to see my children graduate. I'm not going to be able to see my daughters get married. And we can think about the world. Or I can turn around and frame it, the other side of the coin, MashaAllah, Allah loves me. Allah is testing me. Allah is giving me a gift to refine my character. So even in the worst possible environments, we can transform them and make them spiritual. Do we? Or do we get caught up in that worst possible environment? Look what he did to me. Look what she did to me. Instead of Alhamdulillah, Allah has brought me this bala, this test, for me to refine myself. It's a spiritual moment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's gifts are many, and all of Allah's actions in creation are beautiful. Now, when we look at this balance, what's interesting is if we are not there yet, and certainly children are not going to be there. They don't have amygdalas. They can't process this stuff typically. When we tell our children that the doctor said I'm going to die, and this is a gift from Allah, we cannot really expect them to understand this, can we? But we can understand it. This is very difficult for us to come to terms with. How can a tribulation be beautiful? Interestingly enough, if Allah wills and I make it back from Jordan, I'll be doing an interfaith event on why bad things happen to good people. Yeah, this will be a panel discussion, and I will put it out on the group for everyone to come to if you'd like to. And here's the clincher. Here's the key that most people don't realize. We are not talking about the outward dimension of a tribulation. It is the inner dimensional meaning of Sharia in that tribulation that is so beautiful and so spiritual. Many people get angry with God when a tribulation comes along. Imagine that I am on a spiritual path that allows me to get angry with God. Isn't that an oxymoron? But it happens. This is why it is so important to have this knowledge. It is why it is so important to be on a path. Whether we judge something to be right or wrong, good or bad, based on the classification in the sacred law, we are talking about how that tribulation is framed, viewed, or experienced. One can have one of the worst possible scenarios, but because of how they frame it and respond to it, it can be utterly beautiful to them, and I call this turning pain into purpose. So I can tell you genuinely that my experience with cancer, my experience with a stroke was phenomenal. The best spiritual chapters of my life. Not for my family, maybe. But for me, I can genuinely tell you that I laid in the bed and thanked God for every breath I had. I thanked God for the test and prayed that I would make it. No one is saying put yourself in a state of hardship. As a matter of fact, I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying pray for a good hal, for a good state. I was taught wrong. I was actually taught, pray that you get all of your tests in this life so that you won't have any when you die. And I prayed for that. And guess what? I got it. I got what I prayed for. And then some knowledgeable person came along one day and said, stop praying for that and pray for a good hal. And from that day to this, I haven't been in the hospital. Imagine that. That's what knowledge does. We never subjugate ourselves to abuse. This does not mean we see beauty and manifestations when people let themselves be physically or emotionally abused. There is a way we carry ourselves generally, and there is a way we carry ourselves in a situation where we are being abused, and that is that we get ourselves out of it. That is the dimension of how we have to view things, and we have done everything. When we have done everything possible we can to get out. So for example, let's say that we have a single mother. And the only job she can get is as a bartender. People will say, oh, astaghfirullah. Instead of saying, sister, you go get that job and support your family, but as soon as you can get out of that, get out of it. Because you need to take care of yourself and your family. This is the deeper level of understanding and knowledge. But we often condemn people. Oh, astaghfirullah, they're working in a restaurant. Did we find out if that's the only place they can work? Focusing on the inward does not mean that we neglect the outward and vice versa. Both are done simultaneously. The reality is that sometimes we fluctuate a little bit here and there on both sides of the coin. Remember that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said that faith, iman, fluctuates 40 times in a day. This is where and why we have to learn how to read the signs, the ayat. Istikhara is a specific prayer for seeking goodness or guidance when an important decision or task is at hand. So sometimes when somebody meets someone and they think, well, maybe we'll get married, they start praying istikhara. When somebody is applying for a job, they might pray istikhara. Do I accept this job? Don't I accept this job? One of the greatest signs that your istikhara has been accepted is not that you pick up the Mus'haf, the Holy Quran, and look at the first verse that you read, or that you have a beautiful dream that night. People have often told me, I don't have this istikhara right. I said, well, what are you expecting? Like something like the sky to open, the Red Sea to part? Miracles are no longer available for us, folks. That was for the messengers of Allah. But we can have karamat. We can have great blessings, great healings. And when I found out I had cancer, I went home and guess what I did? Despite what I said today, I opened the Quran and it opened to Surah Ankabut. And I began to read. Does man think he will attain to faith with my words? La, no. I tested them aforetime and I will test them now to see who is the true among the false. But I hadn't prayed istikhara, but I asked Allah for guidance and I opened the book and there it was. The vast majority of dreams are the subconscious warring with the conscious about what the nafs want. The majority of dreams. Dreams are hard to interpret when we are in the I.S.L.A.M bisu, the state where the soul is incited and prone to evil. So often in my work as a therapist, people come to me with dreams, and most of those dreams are symbolic of something they want or that they think they want, their nafs wants, but their soul doesn't want it. And they're warring with that. The greatest sign that your istikhara has been accepted is that there is divine facilitation for you in that particular thing. This is not something we can necessarily say definitively. We have to sit back and see how things unfold. Who is in control? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah is all-knowing. We say things like, well, I know I was supposed to get that job, but they gave it to some other jerk. He doesn't have nearly the qualifications I have. And we just go off. Instead of saying, well, it wasn't in the plan of Allah for me to have that job, period. Applying for a job, the interview goes sour. And you don't get the job after praying istikhara. The lesson is to detach from what we think is best rather than the all-knowing. If we indeed did our part, took all of the means, thought things through, did the best of our abilities, asked good people for advice about that particular thing, and prayed istikhara, then we look at the signs. If the door closes, it is a sign that Allah is closing the door because that is what is good for us in this life and the next. And that takes iman, folks. You have to have strong iman to accept and believe that whatever happens is in the qadr of Allah. And it is good, even if it looks on the linear dimensional as something bad. The same goes for marriage and many other important things in life. We have to learn to read the signs. Like a novice weightlifter or sports person who gets extremely sore and doesn't know the balance regarding tearing and repairing, will usually hurt or strain something here and there. They don't know the balance yet. It takes time to master anything. Many people say that it takes 10,000 hours to perfect or master a skill, Now, I thought I would Google this because I've been hearing this all my life, and there's some people that are trying to debunk this philosophy. In the essence, this didn't come from Quran or Sunnah, but I can tell you that if you look at a world-renowned pianist or sports person, they will have invested thousands and thousands and thousands of hours to get where they are there. How many hours do we invest to get where we want to be spiritually? Or do we just get on automatic pilot, we just do the bare minimum, and then we don't understand why we don't have great faith? The more times one performs istikhara, the more ability and experience they will have at reading the signs. By virtue of the effort we have invested, this is the way that we get to the point of clarity. The beauty of Islam for me was the alacrity of mind that I received from it. The crystal clarity of no doubt. All my life I wanted to be free. And freedom for me meant I have no doubt. It's all the answers are there. I wanted this so badly that I was medicated at one point in my life because I didn't have it. Heavily medicated. Like a zombie, you know. But when I found this religion, I found something that took the shackles off of me because there was no doubt in it. All the answers were there for me. It is ultimately about this balance. What happens is that when we have this ability, when we are in an involuntary environment, that both the idea of maximizing benefit and minimizing the harm applies. I maximized the harm in my relationship with relatives when I first became a Muslim. I didn't have the gift of tact. I didn't have the gift of diplomacy. I didn't have any gift of wisdom. So I told him, listen, let me just tell you, I'm a Muslim now. I don't celebrate Christmas. Don't give me any gifts. I'm not going to give you any gifts. I wasn't nice. And it wasn't pretty. And a lot of people are still angry with me all the years later. When we are in an involuntary environment, we have to minimize the harm in whatever way possible and attempt to maximize the benefits. So for those of you who are reverts, for those of you who are converts, whatever word you'd like to use, be gentle with your families. And you'll see why. If I don't finish today, you'll get to see when I come back, if Allah wills. I'll give you that from the Quran and the Sunnah. Reverts ask how to interact with their parents. It is difficult. I've seen all kinds of scenarios, parents reacting in many different ways. In one situation, a young lady embraced Islam. Her father took her off the medical insurance, took her car away from her, and took her out of college. So how do you react to that? That's like declaring war. No transportation and no way in or out. What do we do when the drinking gets out of control? I grew up in a family that had a drink now and then. We didn't have any alcoholics. Well, actually, my brother died of a drug overdose. But they drank. I'm not coming to this family where there's drinking. And you'll have a lot of people to tell you that. How can I maximize my spiritual benefit to do da'wah and minimize the harm? This is hikmah, folks. But we tell people, divorce from your family. I had Muslims come to me and say, and I was told this, you got to give up your family, brother. Clearly, completely contrary to what the Quran says. This requires an accurate knowledge and understanding of the religion. We cannot abandon our parents. We must maintain and materialize ihsan and maintain our relationship with them unless they command us to disobey Allah. One of my relatives, I had a beard down to here, and I'm not exaggerating. You don't believe it, get on YouTube and find one of my old videos. It looked like a beehive hanging from my face. One of my relatives said, I'll give you $10,000 to cut your beard off. I said, no, it's the sunnah. Surah 4, verse 1. No wisdom, you see. Otherwise, I'd have taken that $10,000 and give it to the master, trim my beard a little bit, and then grown it back. Surah 4, verse 1. And fear Allah, for whom you demand mutual rights, and do not cut the relationship of the wombs. How can I tell you don't talk to your family now that you're a Muslim? When it says clearly here in the Quran, do not break the relationships of the womb. Surah 13, verse 25. And those who break the covenant of Allah after its ratification and sever that which Allah has commanded to be joined, they sever the bond of kinship and are not good to their relatives and work mischief in the land. On them is the curse. They will be far away from Allah's mercy, and for them is the unhappy evil home. So how can you teach a convert to give up your family for the sake of Islam? Our Prophet ﷺ said, the one who severs the ties with their relatives will not be among the first to enter paradise. Rather, this person will enter it after being tortured in hellfire. Well, the good news is this. I didn't have this knowledge, and I'm not responsible for what I don't know. The bad news is that my family are still angry with me. Cutting the ties of kinship is a terrible thing in the sight of Allah. In Surah 47, verse 22 and 23, would you then, if you were given the authority, do mischief in the land and sever your ties of kinship? Such are they whom Allah has cursed, so that He has made them deaf and blinded in their sight. So imagine if you knew this as a convert, that if I divorce from my family, and I know this, that I will be cursed by and I will be blinded. Is it talking about this eye? It's talking about the eyes of my soul. It's talking about the ears of my soul. So you want to know why maybe some converts aren't able to get the message? Well, maybe if they knew this and they cut their family off anyway because somebody told them to do that. It's a very vulnerable position when you embrace Islam. I don't have an IQ of 145. I'm not mentally challenged, although sometimes I feel like I am. But when I became a Muslim, somebody told me, Abdul Rahman, astaghfirullah, none of your, I saw you laughing, none of your prayers will be fulfilled because you have fillings in your mouth. You have to get them out. So I went to my dentist. I'm telling you the truth, folks. I wanted to practice this religion right. I went to my dentist and I said, I want all of my fillings removed. He said, Abdul Rahman, I know you had this change of religion. He said, I always respected you as an intelligent man. But do you understand what's going to happen to your digestive system? He said, I will not do it. But you can go down, I'll tell you, there's a dentist downtown Los Angeles. He'll do it for $50 a tooth. Right knowledge, balance. No, I did not do it. I took his word and I went to speak to some person that I respected, and they said, Abdul Rahman, if the people don't give you a proof, don't listen. But it's whatever they told me at the masjid. I just wanted to do it right. I'd been looking all my life for the truth. And I wanted to practice it in an ultimate way. This doesn't mean that you take part in everything that they take part in. We have to learn to mitigate the potential harm in any relationship. Similarly, in our environment, there are certain things we have to do to maintain our jobs and have camaraderie with our fellow colleagues. The art of being tactful is an abandoned sunnah of our beloved Prophet ﷺ, and something rarely found in the modern world. I know people don't like it, and they always defend when I talk about swearing. I never teach a class that I don't talk about swearing, that somebody would say, everybody does it at the end. I don't want to be like everybody. I want to be like Allah wants me to be. The art of being tactful is an abandoned sunnah of our beloved Prophet, and something rarely found in the modern world. What did the Prophet ﷺ do to the Bedouin who urinated in his sacred masjid? In the Bedouin's own words, he got up and came to me, and may my father and mother be ransomed for him. He did not rebuke me nor revile me, much less curse me out. He said, the masjid is not for urinating in. Rather, it is built for the remembrance of Allah and prayer. Then he called for a large vessel of water and poured it over the place where the man had urinated. Imagine if that happened in a masjid today. The man would probably have his legs broke. This is where, folks, there's no balance. There's no wisdom. The messenger came to teach us the book and the wisdom to purify us from this kind of behavior. As Muslims, we want to preserve relations and mitigate some of the harms to us spiritually. This is a golden principle. It is a virtue that if we can learn it, we will have amazing interactions with people, and our relationships will flourish, and we will be change agents, potentially bringing out the good in any particular situation, maximizing benefit in an involuntary environment. How, if the messenger of Allah would not have gone around people who were corrupt, men that had buried 11 of their daughters alive, how would have Islam come to us today? But no, we are self-righteous. But then when we quickly do an examination of our balance and where we are with the internal and the external, we don't meet that first egotistical idea about ourselves, do we? The way we do this is to have an in-depth knowledge and understanding of both the sacred law and how to view everything that is happening around us being from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By the mercy and grace of Allah, despite my lack of tact with my family, my father and my stepmother became Muslims. This requires hammering into our soul the idea of submitting to the divine decree. This is unpopular to speak about in the modern world, but the entire deen of Islam is based on submission. This is the level of creed, practice, and excellence, morality, and ethics we are called to. It is all based on creed. We develop rational platforms to understand it and explain it, that it is all great and important and a part of how to understand the three spheres of Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. The source is one being ultimately rooted in submission to Allah and the Messenger and what He brought. That is the prerequisite for us when we are in involuntary environments that are distasteful. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us that wisdom, to give us that knowledge, so that no matter where we are in this dunya, we maximize the opportunity that someone can become a Muslim. And we minimize the harm that could happen to us spiritually. We minimize the harm that could come to us internally. And that's why we have to be awake. That's why we have to be vigilant. So I ask you all to forgive me. Anything that I said today that was wrong, it came from my nafs and from my ego. Anything that I said that was correct, it came from Allah. And to Allah is all the glory due. Please know that I love you all for the sake of Allah. And I pray that all of us will develop to get the maximum spiritual benefit no matter where we are in an involuntary or voluntary environment. As-salamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.